So first off, I just wanted to say welcome to everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. We're going to explore homeowner and income producing historic tax credits here across New York State. I'm Christina Hingle, the Public Policy Manager for the Preservation League of New York State. And tonight's program is sponsored by the Village of Ossining Historic Preservation Commission. So we're really excited that they've asked us to come here and partner with our State Historic Preservation Office as well to bring this information to all of you. So big thanks to the New York SHPO as well, who's going to be joining us tonight. So just a couple quick housekeeping rules before we get going. We're really excited to be able to offer continuing education credits to both architects and planners for this program tonight. So if that is something you're interested in getting credit for, please shoot me an email. I'll put it up on the screen in a couple more slides, and let me know if you're getting the architect or the planning credit. And we will get you set up with that, what you need to know in terms of reporting. And that is provided by the APA Upstate chapter for the AICP credits and the New York Department of State Education Department. So again, we will be recording this program. So if you miss any, you'll be able to do a rewind, and you can check on the League's YouTube channel in the coming days to find that. We do ask that you keep yourself muted during tonight's presentations so we can hear the speakers. And then at the end, we should have time for a Q&A session where you can unmute and ask your questions, and also put your questions in the chat feature. I won't go too into the weeds, but I know a few of you probably don't know who we are at the Preservation League. So if you're not familiar with us, we are the statewide historic preservation nonprofit. And what that means is that we advocate for historic preservation all across New York State. We promote community revitalization, sustainable economic growth, and of course, protecting those historic and cultural resources that we all love so much. We do this in a few ways through our technical assistance that we offer. You can give us a call up on the phone or shoot us an email if you've got a preservation question or issue in your community. We also like to keep folks apprised of any financial incentives. So we do programs like this on historic tax credits, and we let you know what money is available for potential historic preservation projects. We do have two grant programs, Preserve New York and Technical Assistance Grants at the Preservation League, which we partner with the New York State Council of the Arts to fund studies that go ahead and start off preservation projects. We also coordinate with all of our preservation colleague organizations across the state on issues of preservation and threats to preservation. And of course, one thing to keep in mind is we're always looking for great preservation projects to highlight your work and all the work that all of you do, you know, on your own houses, on your businesses. So we do have an Excellence Award program, which we're really excited to be able to announce our 2021 winners in about a month from now. So stay tuned for that. And of course, always keep that in mind if you're working on a preservation project in the future. So aside from protecting threatened resources, we do have a 7 to Save program for that purpose. So any threatened resources of historic and cultural value, we highlight through that program. And then last but not least, we do a lot with public policy. So this is mainly my focus area. So that means that I create policy agendas and advocate for legislation on the federal, state, and local levels, all in support of historic preservation, in which a large part of are the historic tax credit programs that we're going to be talking about today. So again, we're really excited to have been invited here by the Village of Ossining. One thing that's really great about the Village is they have all their Historic Preservation Commission information right up on the website. Makes it really easy for all of you to kind of understand what's going on. I know a lot of you are joining us from Ossining tonight. If you're not, if you're joining us from somewhere else, don't worry. The tax credit programs work all across New York State. And of course, as long as you're eligible for the programs, they will work for you in your municipality. So with that, I wanted to turn it over for a quick intro to Adam Markovitz, who is the chair of the Ossining Historic Preservation Commission, and just get a sense from him about what's going on with preservation and tax credits, and have him get us started here.
Thank you, Christina. I'm Adam Markovics. I'm chair of the Village of Ossining's Historic Preservation Commission, the sponsor of this evening's webinar. Welcome to my neighbors, homeowners and property owners in the Village of Ossining. To those outside the Village of Ossining, welcome as well. I'd like to say a few words about the HPC and our work in the Village of Ossining before turning it over to this evening's speaker, Julian Adams of the State Historic Preservation Office. But before I do that, I just wanted to thank our village manager, Karen DeTore, who supported our sponsorship of this event, and especially Christina Hengel for collaborating with the HPC and for organizing and advertising this event. So thank you. The Village of Ossining Historic Preservation Commission, or the HPC, is a land use board consisting of 7 volunteer members, all of whom are appointed by the village manager. The HPC's duties include the following: hearing applications for certificates of appropriateness for proposed changes that affect locally landmarked buildings, recommending the designation of local landmarks in historic districts to the Village Board of Trustees, developing public education programs to increase public awareness of the value of historic preservation, and advising owners of historic properties on issues of historic preservation. And it's this last role of the HPC that this evening's event is in furtherance of, providing advice and assistance to owners of historic properties in the village. The HPC wants to be of assistance to owners of historic properties in the village. And that includes owners of individually landmarked properties, owners of contributing properties in our 2 historic districts, the Sparta district, which is residential, and the Main Street district, which is commercial, as well as owners of properties that are eligible for designation as local landmarks. We value you as owners because you are the stewards of these buildings, which are important to us as a community because of their significance to our history and our identity. You are these buildings' caretakers. We appreciate the challenges that ownership of these properties sometimes presents, and we want to ensure that you have access to the best available information and resources to assist you in making decisions concerning maintenance, preservation, and rehabilitation. This evening's event is about 2 programs that are designed to save money for owners of historic properties who undertake significant renovations. The Historic Rehabilitation Tax Credit programs for homeowners, and for owners of commercial or income producing properties. We hope that you find the information this evening useful, and we encourage you to reach out to us should you have any questions. Please feel free to contact me at any time at my village email address, which is amarkovics@villageofossining.org. And with that, thank you for your time. And I'm pleased to turn it over to our expert speaker this evening from the State Historic Preservation Office, Mr. Julian Adams.
Okay. We're ready to go, Christina?
We're ready to go. Let me stop sharing and you can put yours up.
Okay, thank you very much. Just want to make sure we're doing everything right.
Of course.
Okay, I'm going to share my screen. Let me get mine right here. Okay, hold on a second. It's not right yet. I always say, give me a second here. I want to escape that.
While Julian's doing that, I'll just say thank you so much to Adam for his comments because everything he's saying is so spot on. And, you know, it's really great to, you know, have that kind of asset in your municipality. They're there to help. And that's kind of the thing we like to work most with municipalities on is, you know, having that resource. So you certainly got that resources between Adam, myself, and Julian, who you're about to hear from on the tax credit programs.
Are we all set up, Christina?
All set up.
Okay, sorry. I'm doing this from home and doesn't have all the technical whiz bangs I have at the office, so forgive me for that. Thanks for being patient. So I do work with the State Historic Preservation Office. We're part of the Office of Parks, Recreation, and Historic Preservation. We're located at Peebles Island, which is an island where the Mohawk and the Hudson River meets just above Troy, New York. And we are actually on an island. I have to cross 2 bridges to get to work. It's interesting. Our office is the steward of New York State's natural, historic, and cultural resources, and also provides safe and enjoyable recreational educational opportunities for all New York State office visitors and residents. However, we're sort of special within that organization because every state, according to the National Historic Preservation Act of 1966, has to have a state historic preservation office. When the preservation program was created nationally, it was envisioned as a partnership between the states and the feds because the federal government could not be everywhere managing all the state preservation programs. So they set up a preservation office system, and every state has one, including territories have them as well. Ours is located, of course, in the Office of Parks, Recreation, and Historic Preservation. Other states are located in other offices as they saw fit. But our entire goal is to help manage programs and services that help individuals and communities achieve the social, economic, and environmental benefits associated with historic preservation. And there are quite a few of those. People have, in the last 15 years or so, said that preservation was the original green movement because people recycle cans and bottles, but we're recycling entire buildings, which is a pretty interesting thing to say. We bring back revitalization of neighborhoods and downtowns. We provide sustainable development because it's where it's already been developed. The sidewalks and streets and sewer lines and electrical and everything else is already there. We put those back to use in a good way rather than using scarce resources elsewhere. Most people know the term the National Register. There is a New York State Register and a National Register of Historic Places. You have places in Ossining that are definitely on both registers. We manage that at the state level. There's an official formal nomination process where we place things on the registers by documenting their history either architecturally, culturally, economically, socially, even down to bridges, and we even have a steam shovel on the National Register in New York State because it's a very important early survivor of actually steam-powered shovels. We have neighborhoods, we have downtowns, we have industrial areas, rural areas, all sorts of things can be listed on the register as long as it recognizes and helps us understand New York State history as pertains to local, state, and national history. It doesn't have to be all the way up at the national level. We can actually list things that are important on the local level. And that's really where the brunt of our listings are. Properties that are important to New York State history down at the city, the county, municipal level, even down to villages and hamlets. Some of the benefits of the National Register, we always say, well, there's an honorific. It brings recognition to a property. It brings an understanding of its history and its significance to the area. But people always say, well, where's the cash? We get that question a lot. And we do have opportunities for that for property owners who own income-producing properties as well as homeowners properties. Right now, we're going to talk about the income-producing program. Most people know it as a Rehabilitation Tax Credit. It provides a 20% return on your investment, the qualified rehabilitation expenditures, which is a term that means anything permanent into the building. That also includes planning, permits, architect's fees, but also anything that goes into the building that's going to stay there a while. Now, if you are in a qualified census tract in New York State, you're also eligible to add another 20% on top of that to the federal credit at the state level. If you're a project under $2.5 million, that number goes up to 30%. So you look and see what it says down there. Of course, the math says 40 to 50% investment tax credit for commercial properties. That can be taken as credit actually owed on the income taxes, credit owed on the taxes from the income of the building. It could also be used sometimes as a return on the state level. You may be able to get a voucher for the credit you did not use. What it does for you is it helps you meet your pro forma many times in the first couple of years of getting your project up on its feet and either your business or whatever else going. It's provided a great incentive program. We've had over yearly just about $1 billion across New York State, mainly upstate. Last year, we're probably going to hit about $2 billion because we had a couple of big projects around the state, but it's been a very successful tool. What qualifies? Well, commercial is one of those words that people say, well, what does that really mean? Anything that makes money. It can be industrial, agricultural, or rental residential, rental office, anything that you have an income from and pay income taxes on the income from, that will give you a tax credit against that income. So dollar for dollar reduction in the liability. It's not a tax deduction off of your income, it's actually a credit against taxes owed on the income stream from the building. The federal program came first being put into place in the 1970s. The state program is fairly recent. I always forget the actual year it was, but it was within the last 10 years, and it has some improvements. And to make it easier on people, we do a single process, a single review process, single application. We do not require separate applications. We try to streamline and make it easy for people. How are you eligible for these credits? Well, we talked about the National Register. That is the benchmark that is recognized at the federal and the state level that this is an historic property. These are programs that are eligible for historic properties, so therefore we use that stamp that this is a property eligible for these programs. People may know a building listed individually on the state or national register of historic places. Sometimes it's a large church, a large mansion, a large historic resource out somewhere. We also have local state or national historic districts. Those are collections of buildings, and Adam was talking about your districts there. You have your separate districts. We recognize things many times as main streets, as neighborhoods, as rural areas, as industrial areas. A part of a community, however the size of the community, large or small, that tells a story about that part of the community. Sometimes we have entire National Register districts that encompass the entire municipal boundaries. One of those is Pittsford outside of Rochester. The entire village is a National Register district. We also have the ability for local preservation commissions to help us in this program by having their local historic district that's been designated under their local program being certified by the National Park Service. That is available for communities who have a certified ordinance, and I believe Ossining is a CLG, Adam? I'm trying to remember if you are or not. Yes, you are. I knew it was a long time ago. I was working with the mayor a long time ago. So if you are a CLG, a certified local government, which is a federal program that recognizes the excellence of a local preservation program, you are able to, under your processes, do a local district, have it certified, and that's as good as a national or state registered district for the tax credits. We also have an ability that if you are not listed yet, we can get you into the process by saying, okay, are you eligible? Well, come to us, we'll make a read of it, and there's a process whereby we can make a preliminary determination, we call it, that this would be listed if nominated to the registers. It lets you leap ahead to the real nitty-gritty of the program we'll talk about in a little bit, which is the work, the physical work of the building. So therefore, you don't have to wait on that initial actual documentation that this is an historic building formally. You can get assurance of that, deal with that down the road a bit, but also move ahead with your project and program if you need to. This is a map, of course, of Ossining we have here. We have the village boundary, which is, of course, in the purple. We have a small National Register district in there, I believe, the downtown Ossining Historic District and boundary increase. What you're seeing in that colored area, that tan, that means it's a qualifying census tract. This is eligible for the 20 or 30% commercial tax credit, and you'll see later the homeowners credit as well. So we have some, I think we have a little to look forward to and what we can get listed or locally certified. And Adam, that's something that I'm sure the commission will help us with in the near future. One thing the IRS requires, because this being a tax credit, the National Park Service, the state governments, and the IRS are partners in this program. And the IRS put together qualifiers like, are you doing enough work in their head, in their opinion, to qualify for a credit? They look for what they call substantial rehabilitation. Now that may sound somewhat sensible at first, but they have a equation for it. You take the value of the property, you subtract the land value away. If you've owned it for a while, you also subtract the depreciation, any other capital improvements you've done that've added to your basis. That done together is what we call the adjusted basis. Some people say if you could pick the building up off the ground and hold it here, that subtracts the land value away. If you've just bought it, you would have no depreciation in it. If you owned it for a while, you could have depreciation in it. Also, your condition of a property, if you buy a building or a property that's in rough condition, that would be lesser value in the property, but more value in the land. So it is unique to every property. We look to usually our municipal tax assessors to show us the value of the land versus the improvements on it. The history of the property and your ownership history in there also comes down to what we call that adjusted basis. I always tell people I don't expect people to quite get this the first time. It took me a couple of years to get it myself and a couple of trainings at the National Park Service. But it really is, are you putting enough money into the building as it's worth with this kind of equation? They term that as substantial rehabilitation. When the program was created back in the 70s, they wanted people to be serious about the money they were putting into these downtowns and these neighborhoods in a way that would really make an impact, not just a paint job or a small update. They wanted to make sure it was a substantial investment in that building. Again, if you look at our state credit, which totally mirrors a federal credit, if you qualify for the federal credit, there's one. If you're an eligible census tract, Ossining is, the entire village boundary is in that eligible census tract that's determined by the income levels in the area. We do have a state review fee. We charge for a review, so does the federal government. We also have a cap on the rehabilitation costs. State credit, you can only get up to a $5 million state credit. So that would be a $25 million project. The federal credit has no cap. We've in fact seen billion-dollar projects in New York State with no cap on that federal credit, but they could only take the $5 million state credit because that's the state wanted that to happen. We always ask people to think about what you're doing. If you're working on a building that's listed individually or located in a listed historic district, or talking to our office, could it be considered eligible for listing, or are you actually in the process of listing? Those are things that you can get you into the program for the tax credits. Does it pass a substantial rehabilitation test? There are excellent links on the National Park Service website. If anybody wants to scribble this down, get a pencil and a pad, you can Google Technical Preservation Services, National Park Service, and that should take you to that site or the National Park Service website that handles historic preservation. In that bar, the top bar, there will be tax credits. You can click on that. That has a great deal of drop-down topics. And one of those is the IRS link and frequently asked questions. So it'll help you understand better how to understand the substantial rehabilitation test question. Is your project located in eligible census tract? We saw that, yes, our map does. One thing we ask people to do is to talk to us very early before any work begins, because you may do stuff out of the goodness of your heart and maybe it's needed right then, but we have standards we use. We'll talk about those a little time that we have to review the project against. And if you do any work that's against those standards, you may have cut yourself off from having the opportunity to get that tax credit. Also, if your project is complex, now that may be a large-scale project or something that's very complicated for conversion or rehab, we ask that maybe you would like to talk to an expert or a consultant for documentation, design, and financial planning. The Preservation League has an excellent resource and their staff there that can help you refer to people across the state that have those expertises, is their historic preservation, the tax credit, or architecture dealing with historic properties. Our office, of course, is a public entity, cannot do that, but the Preservation League is a great partner for us and they're able to do that. So you can reach out to Christina or our partners there. Now, what we have here is, I always tell people that we have 3 parts of the application, very wisely entitled Part 1, Part 2, and Part 3. There are formal names, but most people throw that around. It's a Part 1 in, you have a Part 2 in, if you have Part 3 in. The Part 1 is basically, are you historic? Okay, let's look again. We talked about if you're at a building in an historic district. You basically say, hey, this is my building and here's how I contribute to the district. You have an entire row of beautiful homes. If you're one of those homes, then you have that documentation in that Part 1 to show I'm in this district and here's how I am important to the district. Commercial building, simple, same way. If you are individually listed, those are the lucky ones. You can skip right to the second part of the application because we already know about those. Those have stood on their own as significant, whereas ones in district, we have to understand, are you in that district and do you contribute? We talked about buildings that aren't listed yet. We may be able to move you in again with the draft National Register program, including photographs and map, to make the point to the Park Service that yes, you are not listed yet, but you will likely be listed if nominated. And again, that's how we can get you rolling on the actual physical work without waiting on that other paperwork. The Part 2, I always tell people, is where the heart of the project starts. That is how we understand in photograph and narrative, plans, photographs, narrative, anything else you need, how we understand what you have and what you're going to do to the building, and does it meet the standards for rehabilitation. I always like to tell people that that rehabilitation word means something really significant to us. People throw the term around, I restored my building, I restored my building. And if you use the programs we have with the National Park Service, restoration really means you're taking it back to a certain date and time. Think of a museum house where something's being turned back like a museum village to show a certain moment in time how people lived and will use the buildings. 99% of what's done out there is a rehabilitation, which means you're taking an existing building and it may have been intact from its original construction date. It may have had a lot of changes. It may have had a hard life, but you're putting it back to use in 2021 and beyond. You've got codes to consider. You've got change of use to consider. In fact, rehabilitation typically can be called adaptive reuse. And in that adaptive reuse, you want to make sure you're maintaining the essential historic characteristics and qualities of the building. That's where the part 2 comes in to make the case. Here's what I have and here's what I want to do. The narrative has to describe existing conditions, including major building features. The supporting documentation has to have photographs to document all areas of the property. Those are typically keyed to plan. Floor plans and elevation drawings can reflect current conditions, proposed work. Historic photographs is available. Those are really important if you're looking to put back something that's missing or you're trying to figure out what was there and move ahead with something else. I always tell people these are the broad guidelines. Your project may not be as complex, may not need exactly all of these things, but these are the things to talk about. What do you need and how does your project need those? You may need all these things. A simple project may not need elevation drawings, for example. We may not need 8,000 different photographs. We may need 15 to 20 photographs. So again, don't be intimidated by this. This is the larger overview for most projects. I talked about our standards for rehabilitation. These were created by the National Park Service when the rehabilitation program, the tax credit program, was created. They have continued to refine them, update them, and interpret them. These are publications from the National Park Service, the Department of Interior. The one on the left is available online. It's actually a booklet, probably about a quarter-inch thick, that has standard treatments and photographs and do's and don'ts and goods and bads in there. It's a great resource. If you're looking to build a library on what does it mean to rehab a building, then these kind of documentations are good for you. Available again at the Technical Preservation Services website. What is the basic emphasis of the standards? There are 10 of them, but we always say there's the heart of them. There's an intent to them. Mainly, I tell people that there are 3 R's. Number 1 is repair rather than replace deteriorated historic features. If the deterioration is so severe that replacement is necessary, the new feature should match the older design, color, texture, overall visual quality, and materials. Okay, we do ask that you repair. You retain first, you repair, and you only replace if something is deteriorated beyond repair so badly, and you replace it in kind if possible. There are materials and craftsmanship that's hard to get these days. We do have the opportunity to talk about substitute materials if for some reason the replacement in kind is not possible, and that depends on the material, its condition, and what availability you have in your region. The major part of it is to preserve a property's historic character by focusing on specific elements, such as distinctive details, methods of construction, and examples of craftsmanship. This is a building in Kingston, New York, just up the river from you on the other side of the river. It is the Kirkland Hotel. This building has a little bit of everything. It has clapboard, it has half timbering, it has wooden shingles, it has plasterwork, it has multi-pane windows, it has single pane windows, a little bit of everything. This building, of course, if you were to take entirely this structure and put it over in a different kind of siding, say a vinyl siding or even an older aluminum siding, this type of character would be lost forever and you wouldn't even understand how this building evolved. So this is an important part of this building's character at the exterior. We also look at major interior features, such as the interior organization of a building, sequences of spaces, circulation patterns. When we look at a structure, go to the interior, it's kind of obvious to people the exterior is where a lot of the character is. You may have a Main Street building that has a really beautiful front, but nothing much in the back. It was loading bays and doors. We understand that, so the emphasis is the front. Moving into a building, the major spaces and circulation patterns of a structure speak to its history. We have things like apartment buildings have corridors and lobbies. Churches have sanctuaries. Banks have banking halls. Schools have large corridors, auditoriums, and classrooms. what in that building helps us understand the historic function of it, what it was meant to do, how it was designed, and how can we maintain those in the rehabilitation. Doesn't mean everything has to survive sacrosanct. We have flexibility in certain areas. We have a great track record of turning like schools into housing. We have a track record of turning banking halls into restaurants or galleries. We have quite a few spaces where we are creative in how we can reuse that in your building. The biggest key is we have to get in there before. When we said contact us early, it's important because we have done this before, and we can sit down with you, your architect, or either designer and go, hey, here's how we did it over here. This project worked. Let's see how we can make it work at your project. This is one of the most significant areas. It also gives us some agita sometimes, is that the major assembly spaces. They can be the most significant spaces in a building. Think of this kind of, this is a church in Buffalo, was built as a Methodist church. It now has a new life as a concert hall, function space, event space, and concert arena. It really is a great use of this space, and you would be hard-pressed to say that this space in this church was not significant. It's decorative, it's large, it speaks to the entire purpose of that building. When we look at this kind of building, there probably will be back-of-house spaces, back spaces, even classroom spaces, offices, things in the basement that would not be as significant at this space. Think of things such as movie theaters. Also, movie theaters have a very significant public assembly spaces. Because of that, and because we have so many of them in the state, we're still trying to figure out in some way how to wrestle that to the ground, because we've got an embarrassment of riches of large assembly spaces that need reuse. And we're always looking for people to bring it to us, and we can figure out how to do it together to keep that building, keep that space in your community and usable again. Windows are always an issue because windows are very much a part of a building's character. People say they're the eyes of the building. They help you understand everything from the age of the building, the function of the building, technology. They're part of the character of a structure. This slide here, if you look up, the windows above have been replaced with an interesting thing off the rack. The ones below are probably in need of repair or replacement, but those speak to the industrial life of this building, and that industrial character should have been preserved in the upper windows as well. They are important character defining features in historic buildings because we have historic industrial windows, historic residential windows, historic commercial windows that really are part of the character of the building. Going back to our 3 R's, the Park Service would ask you to retain them and repair them. And if for some reason they cannot be repaired, replace them to the best of your ability. Again, with windows, we look at, can you use your original material? If not, we can talk about substitute materials. We understand the need of weatherization. If you have an existing window that can be repaired, we have many ways of weatherizing that window quite appropriately with an interior or an exterior storm. If a window has to be replaced, we have the option to go to thermally broken windows with double pane glass if it matches the right configuration of the original window. And that's something the Park Service is extremely careful about on windows in historic buildings, because there's been an enormous, let's just say, outbreak of window replacement companies around the country in the past 25 years or so. They've really been trying to hold the line on how can we not lose all our historic windows. Many times wooden windows are old growth lumber that really is repairable and can't be replaced in any way. Historic steel windows have a long life as long as they're maintained. Something we can talk about in your project. I'll tell people, don't be scared. Don't say, well, they're going to make me keep them. Maybe we're not. I was at a project in Buffalo this morning where the windows are wooden. They're there, but they've had a very long life. And they, number one, they have very deteriorated. Number two, they were undersized to begin with. So we're going to probably figure out how can we replace those in a window that will last longer than the originals did. We do look at things such as energy efficiency, green building. This is an example of a green roof that is to helps cut heating and cooling costs in a building, as well as prevents a lot of runoff from the roof there. We do look at things such as solar panels, green roofs, geothermal, anything like that. We look to see how can we put it into the project without, again, diminishing the historic character of the building or endangering historic materials. We've had a great deal of success in this in the recent past. The National Park Service also put out a publication on sustainable development and historic buildings that is available on their website to download and print. It's interesting. We're seeing new technology almost every couple of months come around, and we are learning as we go, but we have seen a lot of things that actually work with the building quite well, as long as you, again, approach the building as, how do I put this on this structure without damaging the historic character of the building. Historic buildings were actually, and we'll say here, we're designed and built green. I always tell folks that people didn't start get hot and cold in the 1970s. They did that very early on. A lot of buildings were built with windows that open from the top and the bottom to let air circulation through. A lot of buildings have things such as vents on the roof that let air go through stair halls or come in for the basement and go up through the building. We have buildings with shutters to keep out light and heat. Many times I tell classes I teach that buildings were built as climactic machines, and we've forgotten how to pull the levers. We just want to push a button. But many times we look at our building and figure out how can we use the systems that were already built in there and help them along or update them with modern systems. We may be a long way down the road on keeping our buildings energy efficient. Code issues. Yep, when you do a major rehab on a building, you may hit some code issues with the local official. We have things such as fire code. Now that may involve a new staircase, may involve a sprinkler system. We also have things like in how do you deal with your insulation and your weatherization of these buildings. Talking to us early and the National Park Service, if we need to pull them in, can help us work through this and get a code compliant solution that may not be off the rack for the code people, but it will meet their codes, and we will get you a safe building that does not damage the historic character of the building. This is what we do at our office. We work with code officials, with architects, Department of State, to make sure that the historic buildings, when they're rehabbed, are also safe for use. Not only safe for the people who use them, but also in a way that makes them safe for the long-term preservation of themselves. There's always a couple of things we look at. How do you have a successful project? Well, remember, go back to that first time, talk to us early, because we are there to help. I always tell people that we've already paid for our services. With your taxes, we're basically your initial consultants to help you talk to your architects and your designers. The first thing to do, and we're glad to go through a building with you if we can make the time and find an appointment, to go through a building with your architect or your contractor and identify the character defining elements of the building. Again, going back to the National Park Service website, they have a series of technical preservation briefs, and one of them is about understanding historic character. Otherwise, you can call us and we can come out there and walk through it with you and help you understand where you need to be careful, where more changes can go, where more changes have to be avoided from, and how you can handle these situations. We always ask to make sure that you complete work as approved. Now, the Part 2 application, remember, says this is what I want to do. You would get an approval for that, and that is sort of your work permit to go ahead. You need to do it like that. Otherwise, we won't understand how you're doing it, and they may go off the rails. There's also a process in that Part 2 when you come up on something unexpected, which you always do in an historic building, where you can amend that Part 2 approval and get an updated approval because, yes, we understand the changes needed. Here after we're dealing with it, and we approve of it. Keep the standards in mind. It's always good to have at least a passing familiarity with the standards, or even deeper understanding if you want to learn about them and read on them. To keep those in mind whenever changes are made after that Part 2 approval. Again, that amendment process after that Part 2 approval is very, very important. Again, on large and complicated projects, you may want to put an experienced team of architect, preservation consultants, people such as that, into the mix. It's not required from us, but sometimes we tell people you can learn as you go, and sometimes that's an extremely tricky thing for a large, complicated project. We're glad to help, but there's only so much we can do. If you're down on the ground, it may help you to put together a good program, good project team on the ground first. Now, the Part 1 and the Part 2, of course, I mentioned the Part 3. What is the Part 3? It says, well, this is what I did. And again, if you did what you got approved to in the Part 2, and maybe with an amendment, if you did that, then the photographs in the Part 3 should show that. It comes in with a Part 3 cover sheet. I always tell people this is the easiest part of the application because a Part 1 might need a little research. The Part 2 needs plans and conversations, and maybe a little horse trading, a little back and forth on what you're proposing to do. But the Part 3 is, hey, I did this. The project must be completed. You must have probably your certificate of occupancy. I always tell people the paint has to be dry and the nails have to be in. I get pictures occasionally where they're still installing HVAC or they haven't finished the floor. I have to say, guys, we need that actually as finished. The Park Service will say, we need to see it as proposed and totally finished. And I'll have to ask for those informations again. Again, this is a partnership program between our office and the National Park Service. We act as an intermediary between the project and the National Park Service. I tell people that think of them, you as you're in court. You're the person making the case. The Park Service is the judge. We act as your lawyers. We help you put the application together, working with your team. We make recommendations that we feel will make the project better and approvable by the National Park Service, but it is that office that has that final approval for the program. If they give that approval on the Part 3, then you're eligible to take your credit. And again, if you meet those qualifiers for the census certified census tract, you're eligible for the 20 or the 30% credits at the state level as well. All hinges on the National Park Service approval. What could happen? Well, remember that Part 2 is the work program that you get approved to move ahead with. If you start work before that, it can be problematic. We have people who go in and gut something out, and we understand that there was something in there before, but it's now in a landfill or in a dumpster in the back. And that is something that we probably might have asked for to be retained. Well, you've already done the damage then. If you do have work that has to move ahead immediately, such as if you need some roofing repair to keep the building sound ahead of anything else, I tell folks, talk to us. We may be able to give you a verbal thumbs up that that's something you can move ahead with in a certain way that will not damage your chances of approval. We understand that some things just can't wait, but many times a lot can, and you just have to get those approvals first before you can move ahead with the larger parts of the program. Again, if you have project changes and you haven't told us, we need to know what that is, because again, we need to have that Part 2 updated as you go if anything changes in your work program. Now, local commissions are our partners at the local level. They are our first line of information. Maybe sometimes I'd say our first line of defense. They see the project sometimes that we don't see, but if you have a project that's requiring a local preservation commission review, and you're going for the tax credit, those are two entirely different types of approvals. We have people that say, well, I've got my local approval. Well, that's the local municipality. This is a state and federal program. We work with our local commissions. If for some reason we say, hey, that might not fly for the standards in the National Park Service, you say, well, the local commission approved it, let us all get in a room and talk, or at least on a Zoom call and talk, because our job is not to undercut our local preservation partners, but to work with them to make sure we all pull the wagon together. We may have differences of opinion, but we have to understand how can we come together to make the program work for all of us, including you, the applicant. We do have unfortunate things such as denials, where a project may not get approved. And what happens? What happens with that? Well, maybe we have insignificant prehabilitation photographic documentation. Again, our review is a comparative, and the National Park Service review is a comparative. What did you start with, and what did you do? If you have not got good documentation of what was there before and you started ripping it out, we may not be able to understand how appropriate that work was. It's very important to have that documentation. I tell people, go in, take photographs of things you might not even think you need. Just take photographs and we can work it out later. If you, again, complete work that does not meet the standards before contacting us or beginning the application process, that's as bad as not having enough documentation. Again, you may have hurt yourself, hurt your case by doing something that goes against the National Park Service standards. Again, you may do it from the goodness of your heart. You may do it in a way you think had to happen. But again, the Park Service does not take that into consideration. They say, did you meet our standards? Was your rehabilitation documentation adequate to understand the process? Proposed uses to intents for the building and site. That's an interesting one. The 10 standards are the 10 guidelines. The first standard says use a building for its original use or use does not require significant alterations to character defining features or materials. Intents for the use would mean, how are you doing too much to the building? Are you trying to make that building morph into something that's actually going to bend it out of shape? That's the key. Think of a church building, that church interior I showed earlier. If you say, well, we want to put 3 floors of apartments in here, or 3 floors of offices in there, that's too intense for that building. You're going to use it in a way that would not meet the standards and to basically eradicate that character defining space. The last one is substantial interior demolition. We have people that, again, well, I want to take that out. Well, did you have to? Well, I wanted to. Well, want to and had to, and also does the removal meet the standards are very different things. We want to make sure that people are moving ahead in a way that they can get their credit. We are there to advise, we are there to help, and if people, we need to work together as a team on the programs. As I mentioned, there are excellent online technical resources the National Park Service puts out. Again, if you go to that Technical Preservation Services website, you'll find their preservation tax incentives link. Tech notes, preservation briefs are all there to download. The preservation briefs are easy to read. They're maybe 4 to 7 pages. They're well illustrated with drawings and photographs, and they feature a different unique thing: stained glass, tile, clay tile roofs, slate, interior plaster, historic character, weatherization, windows. So if you have a specific question, you can usually find that in the preservation briefs, and they're always updating them and always adding new ones as they go. Lightning protection was one recently that came out that kind of surprised me. Even seismic retrofitting they came out with for earthquake prone areas. And it is an excellent resource online if you have a question about, even if you're not using the tax credit, but you have a question about your stained glass in a building, or a question about your roof, or a question about even insulation. They do have availability. Those are available online for your use and your reading. Homeowners credit. Homeowners credit, again, we want to go down to the fact that you're an eligible census tract, which you know Ossining is. You must own and live in the house. This is not for rental properties. Again, this is called homeowners for a reason. It's your home you own and you live in. This is a little different. This is only a state program. It does not follow the federal program, so it is a bit different than the commercial credit. The total project cost must exceed $5,000. And at least 5% of that has to be at the exterior of the home. This is considered a public benefit program, so they want us to show a little off at the exterior of the building for the public. Now, $5,000 expenditure, that's $250 at the exterior, which is usually, maybe that's repairing your porch, putting a new porch railing in, maybe some new lock set or whatever else on the exterior of a building. $250 at $5,000 is not a horrible amount. However, of course, if you go over $5,000, then of course that goes up percentage-wise for the 5%. The credit is refundable for eligible incomes. That is typically at or below the state median income. You may be eligible to take that credit as a rebate on your taxes, on your credit. In other words, if you have an income below a certain level, then you may be able to take the credit as a check, which is greatly helpful. That was created for lower income neighborhoods that may need that assistance financially. They may not have enough taxable income to use the credit in a sensible way, and they'd rather have the money. That was put in the program for that. Hold on a second, I'm gonna do this. I'm sorry, keep hitting the wrong button. The credit is for New York State taxpayers. That's the homeowners, of course, listed in the state and national register and located in a qualifying census tract. Many times it has many of the same qualifiers as the commercial, but it's for homeowners. State register, national register, individually or historic district, and a qualifying census tract, which as we see Ossining is. This is, again, a little different. You have to have the application approved by our staff before the work begins. You can't come in after the fact. You have to have that, this is what I want to do, work with our staff, and they approve it. That's when you can start your work. It's pretty specific in that way. That was written in the legislation, and we can't change that. So if you come in on a project halfway done, I found about the credit, we say, well, can you come in for project next year? Can you meet the 5,000 goal, and can you do that? Because the key is you can actually do the program year by year by year. As long as you spend $5,000 on the building, 5% at the exterior, you can use homeowners credit every year to do incremental work. We do have a review fees on this one, such as the same with the commercial. Again, this is only state level, not federal. One important thing is you do not need to take the credit in the same year you apply. You can roll it year to year, building enough projects to meet the 5,000, or you can get the credit every year, provided you meet the program-based requirements. So it's pretty flexible on this one. We try to help out our homeowners. We try to be as flexible as possible. There is that issue of you can't start work where you get your approval. That's always an issue. then we move ahead and try to help you as much as we can. Again, this is for everything at the interior of a house: structural systems, foundations, roof, floor joists, ceiling, attic rafters. We have exterior walls, bricks, stones, repair, paint, cornices, gutters, porches, stoops, a little bit of everything: floors, walls, ceilings, trims, paint, even HVAC systems, electrical, plumbing, insulation, and weatherproofing and solar are all eligible items under this program. Again, it's things that are considered permanent installations or permanent work or permanent features at the building. Nothing like furniture, not a refrigerator, nothing like that, but anything that goes into the building: bathroom, kitchen, HVAC, again, plaster repair, floor finishing, window repair, anything like that, exterior, roofing, porch floors, railings, anything like that are all eligible expenses. It's pretty wide open. Solar panels, of course, there are solar panel incentives out there, and solar panels are very popular. However, going back to sustainable development, the same thing applies here as it does for the commercial. We want to make sure that they are not interfering with the historic character of the building. In other words, not visible from a principal elevation. Okay. You have modules, panels, inverters, powerhouses, mountings, roof upgrades, electrical systems, labor, all part of the qualified expenses for this. And if for some reason we cannot put them on a house, we can actually deal with them being placed off-site, garages, sheds, or ground mounted, so they don't have to be on the roof of the building. And many times buildings, particularly residential buildings, it's hard to put a solar panel on a roof that may not be visible from the public. Again, we can work with you on how best to put that. We do have things that do not qualify, typical things outside the historic building. We have to have something that actually helps for human habitation, and that would be typically inside the foundations of a building. Somebody came to us one time with an exterior patio, and we had to say, no, that patio is literally outside the foundation of the building, so it did not qualify. Also, we use the same standards here as we use for the commercial credit, and if you have work that does not meet the Secretary of the Interior standards, we cannot approve your project. Hold on a second, I'm going to move this here. Get this out of my way. Oops, sorry. Again, the house should be your primary residence. You can apply for the credit. Some rules and calculations to consider. If you have, this is for mixed use, like a residential on a first floor where you live in and you rent out the top floor to someone, this is a calculation there. I do not pretend to do this math every day, but this is a breakdown of it. You have to determine an approximation of the percentage of homeowner's base versus rental. Again, typically 50-50, 75-25, anything such as that. A stacked two-family would typically be 50-50. If you have a smaller apartment in a larger building, it may be more like the 66-33. You prepare a scope of work, removing any project associated with the interior of your rental unit. It will not be qualified toward your project total. Qualified projects for the interior personal unit and all exterior work, such as shared spaces, because you use them too, basements, hallways, and attics. Upon completion of the project, using that ratio you saw in number 1, you calculate how much of this money was spent on that part that I live in. 100% of the interior project associated with your unit will be counted. Then based on your ownership percentage, exterior and shared spaces will be counted accordingly. If you occupy 75% of a building and rent out the rest, then the $10,000 project would be adjusted to $7,500 towards your total. It sounds complicated at first, but in reality, think about how much of this building do I live in versus how much does somebody else live in, and what do we share in common, and do the calculations from there. Again, this is being recorded. You don't have, if you can take a screenshot, please do this. It's also something our Homeowners Tax Credit staff will be glad to help with and glad to refresh your memory on, because I need it sometimes. But again, you can combine those credits. Again, if you combine the credits, again, rental income and homeowners is much more involved. This is probably the best advice I can give. You will likely need a larger project team, an accountant, architect, potentially consultant, and talk to your SHPO field rep. Our office has, in our community engagement office, has people dedicated to certain parts of the state deal with the homeowner's credit. If you use the homeowner's credit only, you go back to our first time. Combining the credits are a little more complicated. There's an application on our website. You have it there. You can also just Google New York State Preservation Office tax credit programs. You'll find that out. Again, do not hesitate to reach out to the staff member. There are staff assignment maps on our website and lists of who to contact for the counties. We are broken up by regions. Regions are made up of counties, and people are dedicated to those regions. And on our website, you'll be able to find our contact list. You should be able to find the contact person for your county for the homeowner's credit. Also, see if there's a local preservation organization in your area that may be able to assist you. There are regional preservation organizations as well as local preservation organizations. Also, don't be afraid to call the league. The league can also help you and direct you in place that can help as well. We do need photographs like anything else, because again, this is I had this is what I want to do, this is what I did. We do need to see photographs of the before and again photographs of the after, just like every other tax credit program. There is a $25 Part 2 review fee if your income is above $60,000. Below $60,000, there is no income, there is no fee. The basics here are, again, a narrative description of existing conditions, work you're proposing, estimated project costs. Again, this is for the homeowners. It's pretty simple. We don't need anything elaborate. We just need to know what you have and what you're going to do and your estimated cost. If you look at chimney, loose mortar, old mortar, new mortar will match historic proper mortar in all qualities, strength, color, texture, and tooling. Install ridge ventilation system, install flashing to chimney edges, that dollar. The wording will help you with that. Again, for this program, we are your first contact. We'd be glad to share examples of wording we need, because sometimes we can give you what we need. You give it back to us in the application. As long as the work is done that way, we're okay. You don't have to make this up. We can help you with examples. We can help you with language, how to help you out on these. Again, documentation is important. I'm not going to go down all this here, that we need to see what you have and what you want to do. And this is important here, the second item. Even the most mundane images, like the site of a boiler, are required, because a new boiler may be going in a way that may damage a resource, or the new boiler may be hard to remove without damaging the building. We need to understand exactly what you're doing. The floor plan with photo keys is important. It can be a sketch. You don't have to hire a professional to do that. You can sketch it on your own, as long as the floor plan is relatively accurate and the photographs are keyed with arrows, like number 7, arrow looking this way, number 9, arrow looking that way. If you're working with a contractor architect and they have prepared drawings, please include them. If you're proposing a replacement of a historic feature like windows or doors, we do ask for the manufacturer's cut sheet or shop drawing. If you're having something made, a shop drawing. If you're buying something like a window from a window manufacturer, they'll have what we call cut sheets, and they'll know what you're talking about when you ask for a cut sheet that has the window. This is what it's going to look like. Here's the specifications for it. We do need that. If you have a window you're replacing and say replace window, the photograph should show that it needs replacing, and then again, we need to understand exactly what kind of window is going in there. The Part 3 for homeowners is the same as anything else. We need to see exactly what you did by photographs. Record the cost of each project. Remember, in the Part 2 for the homeowners, you had an estimate of cost, and you put the actual cost. And then the Part 3, remember to pay the Part 3 noted in the application. The fee is based on the total cost of the project. The Part 2 fee is $25 if you're over $60,000, or the sliding scale for the Part 3 fee based on the total amount of rehabilitation. Those are available on our website, the SHPO website, under tax credit programs. What might happen? What might go wrong? Well, completing project work that does not meet the standards. This is one of our, I would say, our favorite picture, but it always hurts to look at it because we have a before and after. A 2-family house that was designed to look like a grand mansion, and somebody thought it'd look better like that. They removed the major character defining elements of the front of this building, which is those columns and that portico and the entire railing. That would definitely be off. That would be cause for denial. We have to have, again, apply for the project that has not been done. We have to get that approval before you start work. If you send in an application and go, I did this, again, we cannot review that and cannot approve that. not having enough documentation prior for demolition to make the case for why something had to be demolished, or showing us something, not allowing us to understand something that was demolished that may have been of concern to us. Intact historic floor plans, we need to understand those. Ripping those out entirely are typically never approvable. Again, floor plans may have some areas of flexibility in areas such as kitchens and bathrooms. We maybe allow some changes, but usually living spaces, living rooms, dining rooms, things such as that are some things we need to understand and probably need to be retained in the rehabilitation. Also, removal of all plasterwork during demolition is something we want to talk about before you do anything. Plasterwork should be retained if possible. We have ways of dealing with new insulation, new wiring, new plumbing, but again, it's so important for talk to us before you do anything, and we help you walk through what is approvable and what we may need to see or what you may be allowed to do. We have also been able to help people in situations such as flooding. This is Owego down in the Susquehanna River several years ago after one of the hurricanes came through, before and after the rehabilitation here. They use the Homeowners Credit. I can imagine it was quite a bit of work at this building. This building could have been lost, but the Homeowners Credit allowed these people to work with our credit, the insurance, as well as the locals, and getting this building back up and running again and retaining its historic character. We have such things as buildings that have really had a very hard life. We tell people buildings can have be orphaned or forgotten about. Our programs can help bring these back to life, such as before and after here. This is in Albany, New York, in an area that is needs the investment, and we can provide this investment into these types of properties and these parts of town with this incentive that allow developers to be attracted to these work, or for homeowners to come in and say, I can do that, and I can get some financial assistance to do that, where it may not be daunting without that. I always like this picture because we do look at things and go, what's missing here? Not every building survives intact, as we know. Sometimes things get removed and we don't know what's there. With a proper documentation and understanding the building, we can help that go back with a restoration item. This poor building here, you'll see that door on the second floor floating out in space. There's another door that's kind of opening a little few feet above a deck that was stuck on. Documentation and physical evidence showed that these porches were there, and we assisted in the homeowner's application with putting those back. And it really makes a difference in this building. That's the end of the presentation. I want to unshare my screen, I do believe, if I can figure out how to do that. Hold on. See how I can do that. And I'm going to stop sharing, and we're back. Okay, Christina.
Thank you so much for that, okay. Julian. Obviously, it's a lot of information to take in.
Yeah, and so every time I do this, I go, oh, really? Every time I learn something new every time.
I was just going to say, for as many times as I've heard Julian give similar presentations, I'm still frantically emailing SHPO every day of the week saying, hey, wait, what about this? Or what about that? So
this is meant as an introduction, not a you-know-it-all now. This is an introduction to hopefully spur questions and spur interest, and we're always available for information after the fact.
Exactly. And I would just add, we're really lucky in New York State to have, not only the New York State commercial and the federal tax credit, but not every state has a homeowner historic tax credit. So one of the great things about being in New York is that you do have that homeowner 20% available to you. And, while we're always hoping that there's more incentives in New York State, where we are very, very lucky to have that 20% at all for qualifying and eligible properties. So it's definitely something you should take advantage of, should you be eligible. Adam, do you have any closing comments or any thoughts from, having heard Julian and how things might affect Ossining?
I want to thank Julian, thank you, Christina, for taking the time this evening to present to us. Julian, in particular, thank you for sharing your expertise with us. SHPO is really an extraordinary agency. It's very unlike many, if not most, other state agencies. And that's become apparent to me in the course of tonight's presentation, just in terms of the amount of interface and collaboration with the public. It's unusual.
That's
It's our
so
job.
true, Adam. And you know, I will add, because Julian's he's too shy to say it, but they do a lot with not a lot of resources. You know, they have a lot of ground to cover, you know, physically and virtually, and they just do such a wonderful job, and you know, make it to programs like this so that you know they can continue to help folks, you know, in New York, and they really do a great job. And more than that, look how great Julian's ceiling background is versus mine, which is just like a jail cell. So kudos to the historic ceiling background.
It's real. It's not a screen.
So yeah, so I just want to thank Julian again so much for coming out tonight, and to all of you for joining us, and of course to Adam and the Village of Ossining Historic Preservation Commission for inviting us out. You know, like we said, please don't hesitate to use any of us as a resource. Reach out by phone, by email, and you know, hopefully you got something from this, and you'll be thinking about projects that you hopefully want to do and get started with tax credits, and you know, just kind of start down that path if you haven't already. So we really thank you for your interest and for joining us tonight.
And thanks for the questions. It always helps us understand, and we like to address them as they come up. So again, don't take this as a last opportunity to ask questions. You've got Christina's information. You've got our contact information. Feel free to use it.
Thanks so much. Have a great night, everyone.
Okay. Thank you for helping put this together, Adam and Christina. Thank you.
Welcome. Thank you. Bye
Bye.
now.